Marcus Wellington adjusted his Italian leather shoes as he stepped out of his black Bentley into the parking lot of Eddie's Diner. The neon sign flickered weakly against the gray October sky, casting an uneven glow over the cracked asphalt. This wasn't his usual scene. Marcus owned a chain of luxury restaurants across 3 states, places where a single appetizer cost more than most people spent on groceries in a week. But today, he needed to understand something his financial advisors couldn't explain in their quarterly reports. The small diner sat on the edge of Millbrook, a working-class neighborhood that had seen better days. Marcus had purchased the building 6 months ago as part of a larger real estate portfolio, but the numbers didn't add up. Despite its humble appearance and modest prices, Eddie's Diner consistently outperformed his high-end establishments in customer satisfaction ratings. More puzzling still, it maintained steady profits in an area where businesses struggled to survive. As he pushed through the glass door, a bell chimed softly overhead. The interior transported him back decades. Red vinyl booths with duct-taped repairs, a checkered linoleum floor worn smooth by countless footsteps, and the comforting aroma of bacon grease and fresh coffee. A handful of customers occupied the booths, an elderly man reading a newspaper, a young mother feeding her toddler, and 2 construction workers sharing a plate of pie. Marcus chose a corner booth where he could observe without being noticed. He had learned long ago that the best way to understand a business was to experience it as a customer, not announce himself as the owner. His tailored suit felt out of place among the casual dress of the other patrons, but no one seemed to pay him any attention. "Good morning. Coffee to start." The voice belonged to a young black woman approaching his table with a steaming pot and a warm smile. Marcus looked up to respond, and immediately noticed her left arm was in a cast from wrist to elbow, the white plaster decorated with colorful signatures and encouraging messages. "Please," Marcus replied, watching as she expertly poured with her right hand while balancing the heavy pot. Her name tag read Jasmine, and despite the obvious difficulty of working with one functional arm, she moved with practiced efficiency. "Take your time with the menu," Jasmine said, setting down a laminated card that had seen better days. "Our special today is the country fried steak with mashed potatoes and green beans. Eddie makes the best gravy in 3 counties." Marcus studied her face as she spoke. She couldn't be more than 25, with bright eyes that held a warmth he rarely encountered in his usual circles. Most service workers in his restaurants approached customers with professional politeness, but Jasmine's friendliness seemed genuine, unforced. "How long have you worked here?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious. 3 years come November, Jasmine replied, shifting the coffee pot to her casted arm with obvious care. "Started right out of high school. Eddie gave me a chance when nobody else would. And you're managing just fine with." Marcus gestured subtly toward her cast. Jasmine's smile faltered for just a moment before returning. "Broke it about 6 weeks ago. Doctor says another month, and I'll be good as new." Eddie didn't hesitate to keep me on, even knowing I'd be slower for a while. Not many bosses would do that. As she walked away to check on other tables, Marcus observed her interactions with each customer. She knew their names, their usual orders, even personal details about their lives. The elderly man was Mr. Peterson, and Jasmine asked about his granddaughter's college applications. The young mother was Sarah, and Jasmine complimented her toddler's new shoes while refilling her coffee without being asked. Eddie emerged from the kitchen carrying plates, a man in his 60s with gray hair and flour-dusted apron. Marcus watched him survey the dining room with the eye of someone who took pride in his establishment. When Eddie's gaze landed on Jasmine struggling slightly to carry 2 plates with her good arm, he immediately moved to help. "Jasmine, honey, let me take those," Eddie said, his voice carrying the authority of ownership but the gentleness of a father figure. "I've got it, Eddie," Jasmine protested, but allowed him to take 1 plate. "Doctor says I need to use the arm some, or it'll get weak." "Doctor also says not to overdo it," Eddie replied with a knowing smile. "Pride's a good thing, but stubbornness ain't always helpful." Marcus ordered the country fried steak special when Jasmine returned, partly because he was curious about Eddie's famous gravy, but mostly because he wanted more opportunities to observe. As he waited, he noticed details that his business training had taught him to recognize. The kitchen ran smoothly despite having only Eddie and one other cook. Orders arrived promptly and accurately, and every customer left looking satisfied. When Jasmine brought his meal, Marcus was surprised by both the portion size and the quality. The steak was perfectly seasoned and tender, the mashed potatoes were clearly made from scratch, and the gravy was indeed exceptional. This wasn't gourmet cuisine, but it was honest, well-prepared food served with care. "Everything taste all right?" Jasmine asked, pausing by his table during a brief lull. "Better than all right," Marcus said truthfully. "Eddie's reputation is well-deserved. He's taught me everything I know about cooking," Jasmine said with obvious pride. "Sometimes he lets me help in the kitchen when we're really busy. Says I've got natural instincts for seasoning. You want to be a chef?" The question seemed to catch Jasmine off guard. She glanced around to ensure no other customers needed attention before answering. "I'm actually in nursing school. Riverdale Community College, part-time evening program. Takes longer that way, but I can't afford to quit working." Marcus felt something stir in his chest, a mixture of respect and curiosity. Nursing school while working full-time? That must be challenging. Some days more than others, Jasmine admitted, especially with this cast making everything take twice as long. "But Eddie's flexible with my schedule for classes, and my professors are understanding when I'm a little tired from working a double shift." "How did you break your arm, if you don't mind me asking?" Jasmine's expression shifted, and Marcus immediately sensed he had touched on something significant. She looked toward the kitchen where Eddie was plating another order, then back at Marcus with a careful smile. "Car accident," she said simply. "Wrong place, wrong time kind of thing." Before Marcus could respond, the bell above the door chimed, and 3 men in business suits entered. Marcus recognized them immediately, developers who had been circling the neighborhood like vultures, buying up properties for renovation projects that would inevitably price out longtime residents. His stomach tightened as he watched them scan the diner with calculating eyes. The men chose a booth near the front, and Marcus strained to overhear their conversation. Their voices carried just enough for him to catch fragments. Prime location, tear down, luxury condos, and lowball offer. His jaw clenched as the picture became clear. Jasmine approached their table with the same warm greeting she gave everyone. But Marcus noticed the men barely acknowledged her existence. They ordered coffee and nothing else, clearly not interested in the food, but rather in assessing the property value. As Marcus finished his meal, he found himself thinking about Jasmine's broken arm and her careful non-explanation. Working in a diner wasn't typically dangerous work, and her hesitation when he asked suggested there was more to the story. He also couldn't shake the feeling that her presence at Eddie's diner was somehow connected to the unusual success of the business. When Jasmine brought his check, Marcus left a tip that was 3 times the cost of his meal. He had learned long ago that observing how service workers reacted to unexpected generosity often revealed their true character. Jasmine's eyes widened when she saw the amount. But instead of effusive thanks, she looked concerned. "Sir, I think there might be a mistake," she said quietly, holding the receipt. "No mistake," Marcus assured her. "Excellent service deserves recognition." "I can't accept this," Jasmine said, trying to hand back the extra money. "It's too much." Her reaction confirmed what Marcus had already begun to suspect. Jasmine wasn't working at Eddie's diner because she lacked ambition or skills. She was there because she needed to be, because Eddie provided something more valuable than just employment. "Keep it," Marcus said gently. "Consider it an investment in your nursing education." As he stood to leave, Marcus caught Eddie watching the interaction from behind the counter. The older man's expression was protective, alert, like a father watching a stranger talk to his daughter. When their eyes met, Eddie nodded politely but kept his distance, clearly respecting Jasmine's ability to handle herself while remaining ready to intervene if needed. Walking back to his Bentley, Marcus found himself deeply unsettled by the experience. In 35 years of business ownership, he had rarely encountered a workplace where employees seemed genuinely cared for rather than simply managed. Eddie's diner operated on principles that business schools would consider outdated, yet it succeeded where more modern establishments failed. As he drove away, Marcus glanced in his rearview mirror. Marcus stared at his computer screen, his scotch forgotten as he read the newspaper archives he had discovered. The headline from 6 weeks ago made his blood run cold. Local nursing student injured saving family from burning vehicle. The accompanying photo showed Jasmine being helped into an ambulance, her left arm clearly injured, her face streaked with soot, but her eyes focused on something beyond the camera's frame. The article detailed how Jasmine Williams had been walking home from her evening classes at Riverdale Community College when she witnessed a single-car accident. A family of 4, parents and 2 young children, had been trapped when their vehicle caught fire after striking a utility pole. Despite the obvious danger, Jasmine had crawled through the wreckage to extract the unconscious children while emergency responders were still en route. Miss Williams suffered a compound fracture to her left radius when a piece of twisted metal collapsed during the rescue. The article quoted Fire Chief Robert Martinez. Her quick thinking and courage saved 4 lives. The children were unconscious from smoke inhalation and wouldn't have survived much longer. Marcus scrolled through related articles, piecing together a story that grew more remarkable with each detail. The family Jasmine saved had been the Hendersons: Michael, a construction worker, his wife Lisa, a part-time teacher, and their daughters Emma, age 6, and Sophie, age 4. They had been returning from Sophie's dance recital when a drunk driver forced them off the road. What struck Marcus most was what the articles didn't say. There was no mention of Jasmine seeking recognition or compensation. No interviews where she called herself a hero. The only quotes from her were brief statements expressing relief that the family survived and hope for their full recovery. Marcus found a follow-up article from 2 weeks later. Hero nursing student returns to work despite injury. The piece included a photo of Jasmine at Eddie's diner, serving customers with her arm in a cast. Eddie was quoted extensively, his pride in his employee evident even in print. "Jasmine's the kind of person who'd give you the shirt off her back," Eddie had told the reporter. "She didn't hesitate to risk her life for strangers, and she didn't hesitate to come back to work even though the doctor told her to take time off. We adjusted her duties, of course, but she insisted she needed to work. Said her nursing school tuition wouldn't pay itself." The article mentioned that Jasmine had declined offers from several local organizations to help with her medical bills, insisting that other people needed the assistance more than she did. It also noted that she had visited the Henderson family multiple times during their hospital stay, bringing homemade soup from Eddie's kitchen and reading to the children. Marcus leaned back in his leather chair, processing what he had learned. Jasmine wasn't just a dedicated employee working through an injury. She was someone whose instinct in a crisis was to risk everything for strangers. Her broken arm wasn't the result of a simple car accident. It was evidence of extraordinary courage and selflessness. He continued researching, finding Jasmine's academic records through connections at Riverdale Community College. Her grades were exceptional despite working full-time. Her professors described her as uncommonly dedicated and naturally gifted with patience. One nursing instructor had written a letter of recommendation that described Jasmine as the kind of nurse who will change lives through her combination of technical skill and genuine compassion. Marcus discovered that Jasmine's father had died when she was 16, leaving her mother to raise 3 children on a factory worker's salary. Jasmine had been working since high school to help support her family while pursuing her education. The nursing program at Riverdale was her 3rd attempt at college. She had started twice before but had to drop out when family financial crises demanded her attention. As dawn broke over the city, Marcus found himself looking at Eddie's diner from an entirely different perspective. This wasn't just a small business succeeding against the odds. It was a sanctuary for someone truly exceptional who deserved far more support than she was receiving. He showered and dressed in more casual clothes than usual, khakis and a button-down shirt instead of his typical Italian suits. If he was going to return to Eddie's diner, he wanted to blend in better. More importantly, he needed to understand the full situation before deciding how to proceed. Marcus arrived at the diner during the breakfast rush, taking the same corner booth he had occupied the day before. Jasmine was working with obvious determination, moving efficiently despite her cast. Marcus watched her juggle multiple tables while maintaining her genuine warmth with each customer. She remembered everyone's preferences, asked about their families, and somehow made each person feel like the most important customer in the restaurant. When she approached his table, her smile was just as bright as the previous day. Good morning. Back for more of Eddie's famous coffee. Actually, I was hoping to try the breakfast special, Marcus said, though his real purpose was to observe Jasmine more closely. And maybe you could tell me more about the neighborhood. I'm considering investing in local businesses. Jasmine's eyes lit up with interest. Eddie's been here for 15 years. He's seen this neighborhood through good times and bad. The people here are hardworking, honest folks who just want a fair chance. As she spoke, Marcus noticed fresh flowers on several tables, daisies and carnations in simple glass jars. The flowers are a nice touch, he commented. Those are mine, Jasmine said with a slight blush. I grow them in containers behind my apartment building. Figured they might brighten people's day a little. Eddie lets me bring them in even though they're probably against some health code regulation. The simple gesture revealed everything Marcus needed to know about Jasmine's character. Despite working long hours, attending school, and dealing with a serious injury, she still found time to grow flowers for strangers' enjoyment. When Eddie brought Marcus's breakfast, perfectly prepared eggs, crispy bacon, and hash browns that rivaled any upscale brunch spot, Marcus complimented the quality. Jasmine helped me prep these potatoes this morning, Eddie said with obvious pride. Girls got instincts in the kitchen that can't be taught. Been trying to convince her to consider culinary school instead of nursing, but she's got her heart set on helping people heal. Both are ways of helping people, Marcus observed. True enough, Eddie agreed. But nursing's what calls to her. Been that way since she was young, according to her mama, always patching up neighborhood kids who got hurt playing. As the morning progressed, Marcus witnessed several interactions that deepened his understanding of Jasmine's role in the community. An elderly woman named Mrs. Rodriguez came in looking distressed, and Jasmine immediately left her other tasks to sit with her. Marcus couldn't hear their entire conversation, but he saw Jasmine writing something on a napkin and pressing it into the woman's hand along with a gentle hug. Later, a young man in work clothes apologized to Jasmine for not being able to leave his usual tip because his hours had been cut at the factory. Jasmine waved off his concern and brought him an extra-large portion without charging for the upgrade. When he protested, she simply said, Eddie's orders, though Marcus suspected the generosity was her own initiative. The most telling moment came when the Henderson family entered the diner. Marcus recognized them immediately from the newspaper photos, though they looked healthier and happier than in the accident coverage. The two little girls ran directly to Jasmine, who knelt carefully to hug them with her good arm. Miss Jasmine, 6-year-old Emma exclaimed. Look, Sophie drew you a picture. 4-year-old Sophie shyly presented a crayon drawing that appeared to show a figure with long dark hair, wearing a white coat. It's you being a nurse, Sophie explained solemnly. Daddy says you're going to help lots of people feel better. Marcus watched Jasmine's face transform as she looked at the drawing. Her professional composure cracked slightly, revealing deep emotion before she regained control. This is beautiful, Sophie. I'm going to put it somewhere very special. Michael Henderson approached, extending his hand to Jasmine. How's the arm healing? Good as new in a few more weeks, Jasmine assured him. How are you folks doing? Better every day thanks to you, Lisa Henderson said, her voice thick with emotion. The girls still talk about their guardian angel. We all do. Marcus observed the family's obvious affection for Jasmine and her genuine care for their well-being. This wasn't the relationship between a hero and the people she saved. It was deeper, more personal. Jasmine had clearly remained involved in their lives, checking on their recovery and maintaining a connection that went beyond the dramatic circumstances of their first meeting. After the Hendersons left, Marcus watched Jasmine carefully tape Sophie's drawing to the wall behind the coffee station where she could see it while working. The gesture was simple but revealed the profound impact these relationships had on her life. When the lunch crowd began arriving, Marcus noticed the 3 developers from the previous day entering again. This time, they brought a woman in an expensive suit who was clearly some kind of professional, likely a real estate appraiser or lawyer. They chose a different booth, but continued their assessment of the property with barely concealed anticipation. Marcus felt his protective instincts surge as he realized these people were moving forward with plans that would destroy everything he was witnessing. Eddie's Diner wasn't just a business. It was a community center where people like Jasmine could thrive while serving others who needed exactly the kind of authentic care she provided. The developers' conversation became more audible as their confidence grew. Marcus heard one of them mention demolition permits and 60-day notice. Another discussed market rate housing and profit margins. The woman with them was taking detailed notes and photographs, clearly documenting the property for formal proceedings. When Jasmine approached their table to take their order, Marcus watched the developer's dismissive treatment of her with growing anger. They barely looked up from their conversation, ordering coffee in tones that suggested she was an inconvenience rather than a person. One of them actually continued talking while she was speaking, forcing her to repeat herself. Marcus made his decision in that moment. He couldn't allow these people to destroy what Eddie and Jasmine had built here. More importantly, he couldn't stand by while someone like Jasmine, who risked her life to save strangers and brought flowers to brighten people's days, lost her job and community to corporate greed. After paying his check and leaving another generous tip, Marcus walked outside and called his lawyer. "Robert, I need you to research something immediately. I own a property in Millbrook that I want to protect from development pressure. What options do I have to ensure it remains a restaurant?" "Marcus, is this about Eddie's Diner?" Robert asked, his surprise evident. "I've had 3 different development groups contact me about purchasing that property from you this week. The offers are quite substantial." "How substantial?" "The highest is 7 times what you paid 6 months ago. The neighborhood is becoming very desirable for luxury housing development." Marcus felt sick thinking about how much money was driving the pressure to destroy places like Eddie's Diner. "I'm not selling, Robert. What I need to know is how to protect the current business and its employees permanently." "That's unusual, Marcus. Most property owners in your position would be celebrating this windfall." Marcus spent the next 3 days conducting what his business associates would have called due diligence, but what felt more like detective work. Through careful inquiries at Riverdale Community College, conversations with local business owners, and discreet discussions with social workers who knew the Millbrook community, he began to understand the full scope of Jasmine's situation. The picture that emerged was both inspiring and heartbreaking. Jasmine Williams was not only supporting herself through nursing school while working full-time at Eddie's Diner, she was also sending money home to help her mother raise her 2 younger siblings. Her father's death from cancer had left the family with substantial medical debt that Jasmine had quietly assumed responsibility for paying. More troubling, Marcus discovered that Jasmine's car accident explanation for her broken arm was technically true, but incomplete. She had indeed been injured in a vehicle-related incident, but the circumstances were far more heroic than she had led anyone to believe. The drunk driver who forced the Henderson family off the road had initially fled the scene. When police finally arrested him 2 weeks later, he turned out to be the son of a prominent local developer, one of the men Marcus had seen surveying Eddie's Diner. The connection wasn't coincidental. Marcus's investigator, a retired police detective he sometimes employed for background checks, revealed that the developer, Richard Blackwood, had been pressuring multiple Millbrook business owners to sell their properties. When Eddie had refused his initial offers, Blackwood had begun what could only be described as a harassment campaign. Repeated health inspections, parking violations, and pressure on suppliers to increase Eddie's costs. The night Jasmine was injured, she had been walking home from a late nursing school exam when she witnessed the accident. Security footage from a nearby gas station showed her running toward the burning vehicle without hesitation, even as other bystanders called 911 but remained at a safe distance. She had pulled both children from the wreckage before emergency responders arrived, sustaining her injury when she returned for the unconscious parents, and part of the vehicle's frame collapsed on her arm. What Marcus found most disturbing was that Richard Blackwood's son, David, had fled the scene while his victims were still trapped. He had been arrested only after tips from witnesses who had recognized his distinctive sports car. David Blackwood was currently facing charges for DUI, vehicular assault, and leaving the scene of an accident, but his father's expensive legal team was working to minimize the consequences. Marcus sat in his office on Thursday evening, reviewing the stack of documents his investigator had compiled. The more he learned about the situation, the more his business instincts warred with his growing sense of moral obligation. Protecting Eddie's Diner and helping Jasmine would put him in direct conflict with Richard Blackwood, who controlled significant real estate interests throughout the region. In purely financial terms, it would be smarter to sell the property and avoid the complications. But Marcus kept thinking about Jasmine's genuine smile as she served customers despite her injury, her flowers brightening the diner tables, and the way the Henderson children had run to hug their guardian angel. Some things, he was beginning to realize, were worth more than profit margins. Friday morning found Marcus at Eddie's diner again, this time with a specific purpose. He had called ahead to reserve a time to speak with Eddie privately, identifying himself only as a potential investor interested in supporting local businesses. Eddie had agreed to meet before the restaurant opened to the public. Marcus arrived at 6:30 to find Eddie already prepping for the day, his movements efficient and practiced in the quiet kitchen. The older man looked up with a welcoming but cautious expression as Marcus entered through the unlocked front door. "You're the fellow who's been in here a few times this week," Eddie observed, wiping his hands on his apron. "Jasmine mentioned you left some generous tips." "I did," Marcus confirmed. "I was hoping we could talk about your restaurant and some challenges you might be facing." Eddie poured 2 cups of coffee and gestured for Marcus to sit at the counter. "Depends on what kind of challenges you're asking about. If you're here to make an offer on this building, I should tell you up front that several other folks have tried that this week. I'm not here to buy your building, Eddie. I already own it." The confession hung in the air between them as Eddie processed the information. His expression shifted from surprise to wariness to something approaching understanding. "You're Marcus Wellington," Eddie said slowly. "Jasmine mentioned you asked a lot of questions about the neighborhood. I should have recognized the name from the property management company. I bought this building as part of a larger portfolio," Marcus explained. "I had no idea what kind of business was operating here until I decided to visit personally. What I found was something I wasn't expecting." "And what was that?" "A restaurant that succeeds because it cares about people instead of just profit," Marcus said honestly. "And an employee who embodies everything I thought I had lost in business. Genuine service, real community connection, and the kind of character that can't be taught or bought." Eddie studied Marcus's face carefully. "What do you want, Mr. Wellington?" "I want to help," Marcus said simply. "I've learned about the pressure you're facing from developers, about Jasmine's situation with nursing school and her family obligations, about what really happened the night she broke her arm. I want to help both of you. But I need to understand what kind of help you'd be willing to accept. Jasmine doesn't know who you are. No one does except you right now." Eddie sipped his coffee thoughtfully. "That girl has more pride than sense sometimes. She won't take charity, no matter how you dress it up. Tried to give her a raise after the accident, and she insisted I couldn't afford it. Tried to give her time off for her arm to heal properly, and she showed up anyway. What if it wasn't charity?" Marcus asked. "What if it was investment in someone with exceptional potential?" Before Eddie could respond, the sound of the front door opening interrupted their conversation. Jasmine entered, moving carefully while balancing her nursing textbooks along with her purse and jacket, her cast making the simple task more challenging. "Morning, Eddie," she called out cheerfully. "Sorry I'm a few minutes early. Wanted to get some studying done before the morning rush starts." She noticed Marcus sitting at the counter and smiled. "Oh, good morning. You're becoming a regular customer." Marcus felt his careful plans shifting as he looked at Jasmine's tired but determined face. She had clearly been up late studying, probably after working a full shift the previous day, yet she maintained her positive attitude and dedication to excellence. In that moment, he realized that whatever help he provided would need to be immediate and substantial. "Jasmine," Eddie said carefully, "this is Marcus Wellington. He owns this building." Marcus watched Jasmine's expression change as she processed the information. Her smile faltered, replaced by concern and confusion. "You're the landlord?" she asked quietly. "Are we? Is there a problem with the lease?" "No problem," Marcus assured her quickly. "Actually, I've been coming here because I was impressed by the quality of service and the obvious care everyone takes with customers. Mr. Wellington was just telling me he's interested in investing in local businesses," Eddie said, clearly choosing his words carefully. Jasmine relaxed slightly, but remained wary. "That's nice. Eddie's built something really special here." "I can see that," Marcus said. "In fact, I was hoping to discuss some opportunities that might benefit both the restaurant and its employees." "What kind of opportunities?" Jasmine asked, setting down her books and giving Marcus her full attention. Marcus had prepared several different approaches to this conversation, but looking at Jasmine's direct, honest gaze, he decided on the most straightforward option. I've learned about your nursing school program and your academic performance, he began. I've also learned about the financial challenges that are making it difficult for you to complete your education as quickly as you'd like. Jasmine's posture stiffened. I don't know what you think you've learned, but I'm managing just fine. I'm sure you are, Marcus said gently. But managing and thriving are two different things. I'm also sure you'd prefer to focus on your studies instead of working 60 hours a week to pay for them. Mr. Wellington, Jasmine said, her voice taking on a formal tone, I appreciate whatever you're trying to do, but I don't accept handouts. This wouldn't be a handout, Marcus said quickly. I'm proposing a business arrangement. Eddie leaned forward with interest. What kind of business arrangement? I'm expanding my restaurant operations, Marcus explained, the idea forming even as he spoke. I need someone with exceptional customer service skills, proven dedication, and natural food service instincts to help me evaluate potential new locations and training programs. It would be part-time, flexible enough to accommodate school schedules, and pay significantly more than traditional restaurant work. Jasmine looked skeptical. You want to hire me based on watching me serve coffee for a few days? I want to hire you based on your character, Marcus said honestly. The coffee service just confirmed what I suspected about your work ethic and people skills. What exactly would I be doing? Jasmine asked, her curiosity beginning to overcome her suspicion. Initially, visiting other restaurants with me to evaluate their operations. Later, possibly helping develop customer service training materials based on what makes Eddie's Diner successful. Eventually, if you're interested, consulting on new restaurant concepts that prioritize community connection over profit maximization. Marcus watched Jasmine consider the proposal. He could see her calculating the financial possibilities against her ingrained skepticism of offers that seemed too good to be true. How much part-time work are we talking about? She asked finally. 10 to 15 hours per week to start. Flexible scheduling around your classes and current job here. The pay would be enough to cover your tuition and living expenses, with the expectation that you'd be able to reduce your hours here to focus more on your studies. I can't leave Eddie short-staffed, Jasmine said immediately, which is why I'm also proposing to help Eddie expand his staff, Marcus continued. Hire additional servers, maybe even expand the menu and hours. Turn this place into the neighborhood anchor it's already becoming, but with the resources to do it properly. Eddie had been listening quietly, but now he spoke up. This all sounds generous, Mr. Wellington, but what's in it for you? Successful businessmen don't usually offer opportunities like this without expecting something substantial in return. It was a fair question, and Marcus had been dreading it because the honest answer would sound unbelievably altruistic. What I get is the knowledge that I'm supporting someone who deserves success and protecting a business that serves its community well. What I get is the chance to remember why I went into the restaurant business in the first place, before it became just about profit and market share. And Eddie pressed, clearly sensing there was more to the story. Marcus took a deep breath. And I get the satisfaction of preventing Richard Blackwood from destroying this place to build luxury condos that no one in this neighborhood can afford. The mention of Blackwood's name caused both Eddie and Jasmine to react sharply. Eddie's jaw tightened, while Jasmine's face went pale. You know about Blackwood? Eddie asked grimly. I know he's been pressuring you to sell. I know his son was the drunk driver who caused the accident where Jasmine was injured. And I know he's been using increasingly aggressive tactics to force out businesses that won't sell to him voluntarily. Jasmine sank onto a stool beside the counter, her composure finally cracking. His son nearly killed that family. He could have stayed to help, but he ran away and left them to die. I know, Marcus said softly. I also know you didn't hesitate to risk your life to save people you'd never met. That's the kind of character that deserves support, not the kind that should struggle just to pay for an education. So this is charity, Jasmine said, her voice flat. This is justice, Marcus corrected. And it's also business. I need someone I can trust to help me understand what makes restaurants truly successful beyond just financial metrics. Someone who understands that taking care of people is the foundation of sustainable success. Someone who proves every day that excellence comes from caring about your work and the people you serve. Marcus pulled out a folder he had prepared the night before. I've drawn up a formal consulting contract. Specific responsibilities, clear compensation, performance expectations. Nothing that requires you to accept charity or compromise your independence. Just an opportunity to use your skills in a way that pays better and supports your long-term goals. Jasmine looked at the contract, then at Eddie, then back at Marcus. Why should I trust you? It was the crucial question, the one that would determine whether his carefully planned intervention succeeded or failed. Marcus realized that his answer needed to be completely honest, even if it revealed more about his motivations than he was comfortable sharing. Because 3 days ago, I was a successful businessman who measured success purely in financial terms, he said quietly. Then, I met someone who broke her arm saving strangers and came back to work because she didn't want to let her coworkers down. Someone who brings flowers to brighten customers' days and remembers everyone's personal stories. Someone who's working her way through nursing school while supporting her family and maintaining a 4.0 GPA. You changed how I think about what success really means, Jasmine. This is my chance to prove that business can be a force for good instead of just profit. I'm not most property owners, Marcus said firmly. I need options by tomorrow morning. As he drove away from Eddie's diner, Marcus's mind was racing with possibilities. He had the resources to protect the restaurant and support Jasmine's education, but he needed to proceed carefully. Jasmine had already refused his excessive tip the day before. She clearly wasn't someone who would accept charity easily. Whatever help he provided would need to be offered in a way that preserved her dignity and independence. That evening, Marcus canceled his dinner plans and returned to his research. He learned everything he could about nursing scholarships, community college funding, and small business protection laws. By midnight, he had the outline of a plan that would change Jasmine's life while preserving everything that made Eddie's diner special. But first, he needed to understand why someone with Jasmine's courage, intelligence, and dedication was working in a diner instead of already succeeding in nursing school. The answer, he suspected, would reveal just how much help she truly needed and how carefully he would need to provide it. But Marcus owned the building. He had the power to stop them, to protect Eddie's diner and its employees. The question was whether getting involved was worth the complications it would inevitably create. His lawyers and accountants would advise against any emotional decision-making, especially regarding a small property that barely registered on his portfolio's bottom line. Yet as he thought about Jasmine's determination to work through her injury, her dedication to nursing school despite obvious financial struggles, and her genuine care for customers who probably couldn't afford to tip generously, Marcus found himself caring less about financial calculations and more about something he had lost touch with years ago, the human cost of business decisions. That evening, Marcus sat in his penthouse office reviewing the property files for Eddie's diner. The building was old but structurally sound, located on a corner lot that would indeed be valuable to developers. His purchase price had been fair, perhaps even generous, based on market conditions 6 months ago. But property values in Millbrook were rising rapidly as gentrification crept outward from the city center. Marcus poured himself 2 fingers of 25-year-old scotch and stood at his floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out over the city lights. Somewhere out there, Jasmine was probably studying for nursing school exams after a long day of serving customers with a broken arm. Eddie was likely closing up the diner, preparing for another early morning of cooking breakfast for working people who needed good food at reasonable prices. And 3 developers were probably finalizing plans to turn that little piece of authentic community into another sterile luxury development that would serve no one who currently called Millbrook home. Marcus had built his fortune by being ruthless when necessary, compassionate when profitable, and always focused on the bottom line. But something about today's visit to Eddie's diner had reminded him of why he originally went into the restaurant business. Not to accumulate wealth, but to create spaces where people could come together over good food and genuine hospitality. He picked up his phone and scrolled through his contacts until he found his property manager's number. Tomorrow, he would need to make some calls and review some contracts. Tonight, he had research to do about a young nursing student who was working with a broken arm and carefully avoiding questions about how she got it. Marcus returned to his computer and began typing Jasmine's name into various search engines. What he discovered in the next hour would change everything he thought he knew about Eddie's Diner and the young woman who served coffee with such genuine warmth despite whatever hardships life had thrown her way.